So what we can do from a point of view of lifestyle, what we can do on a daily basis, well, we could start to avoiding certain foods, okay? Certain foods, we know they increase inflammation. So if you are, example, prone to asthma, you should avoid inflammatory kind of food. But let's see what kind of food they interfere with the lungs and the breathing system. First is dairy products. Now, dairy products contain a specific protein which is called casomorphin. And casomorphin is normally make you to produce a lot of mucus on the gastrointestinal tract. Now, once these mucus start to be proliferate, it starts to grow bacteria, and the bad bacteria that tends to damage the lining of the guts. So some of this casomorphin, long term, will get on the blood circulation, and some of the casomorphin is gonna get to your lungs, because we know everything that is in the circulation is gonna go to your lungs sooner or later, you know, for the breathing processes. At this point, we know that if casomorphin gets to your lung, it makes you to produce more mucus. And that is the reason why people, then they are having gastrointestinal problem, they often get chest infections and they also get congestion. It's due to casomorphin, okay? So if you have already a weak gut, I will suggest to avoid dairy almost completely, okay? Or minimizing the dosage as much as you can. Another things that you should be avoiding is all the type of cold cuts, ham, bacon, the salami, the prosciutto, etc. Why? Well, we know they're not very healthy for us for so many different reasons that we talked previously, but also they contain as a preservative a specific compound, which is nitrates, okay? And the nitrates, they are one of the causes that it causes the COPD. So if you are prone to lung problems, to breathing problems, and you know that you are consuming a little bit more of these cold cuts, well, I would say avoiding completely if you can. Another thing is the acid food. Now, the acid food first is going to acidify your body, so your lungs, they have to work harder to maintain the balance together with your kidneys and the other organs. But also, acid food, they might increase the acid into your stomach. And because we know that certain areas, and they are sort of shared between the gastric system and the respiratory system, if we get gastric reflux, sometimes some of that acid tends to go to your lungs, okay? So if we get reflux all the time, we might actually starting to inflame our lungs because acid gets in. So we need to be really cautious and really careful. If we get constant coffees, constant alcohol, a lot of citrus juices, fruit juices in general, a lot of tomato sauce, we might start to get a lot of acid on the stomach, and that can also have an impact, a negative impact in your respiratory system, specifically the lungs. Other food to avoid. Well, if you already have problem breathing, you might want to avoid anything and it tends to block you. Why? Because if we are bloated, we tend to compress the diaphragm and we are not going to be able to breathe properly, okay? So anything that it will increase the bloating, like carbonated beverages or some kind of vegetables, for example, broccoli and cabbages, they are usually quite bloating in a way. Fried food, or anything that we know we won't digest particularly well. Some people, for example, they can't digest properly raffinated carbs and they tend to bloat. How many of you probably eat a pizza and it was like, oh, so nice, so beautiful, and then they come back home and they say, oh, I feel so bloated. That is because we're not able to process sometimes some of those, or they weren't levitated properly, they didn't rise properly, they didn't give enough time, and so we tend to bloat. And when we tend to bloat, that gas put a lot of pressure on our gut, on our lungs. So if we have an already problem on breathing, that bloating doesn't definitely help. Excessive salt. Excessive salt, it tends to retain a lot of liquids in your body, and it tends to congest your lungs as well, which they are very well hydrated. So too much of salt give you too much of an edema, and it's going to give you a constriction on the lungs. And last but not least, all those typical food, then they contain histamine themselves. So we might not be allergic, okay? You might be able to eat your eggs or eat your strawberries quite easily. But if you are prone to lungs or breathing problems, if you have this food and you are in a very high stage of inflammation, because this type of food contains a lot of histamine itself, you will increase that histamine in your body and you get a more constriction of your breathing pipes. So we should try to avoid them and or to reduce them, specifically when we're having an inflammation. And some of them, they're very easy to avoid, like sauces, like mayonnaise or ketchup. Some of them, they are less easy to avoid, like example tuna, because I want tuna for my amiga, unless you're vegan. If you're vegan, try to avoid, example, the citrus juices. Those ones, they are quite high on histamine. Or try to avoid your pineapple or your strawberries. They might increase your level of histamine, which is never a good idea. Histamine is what is actually released during the allergic time, the allergic season. We breathe the pollen, the mast cell in our nose detect the pollen as a trigger, the mast cell in our nose produce the histamine, and we sneeze. It's a classical mechanism of protection, but when it's inside our body, like more deep than just our nose, then it tends to constrict our windpipe. So from an easy area, this part gets swollen, and plus the muscle contracts, so there is no anymore any space or a minimum space for the air to actually be in and out, and that's actually can be dangerous. So it depends on your level or your client's level of breathing problems. Always make sure then these specific products they can avoid from their diet.